The gate agent called the final boarding call for Flight 1142 at 11:47 at night, and Marcus Cole was already running. Not running in the way athletes run. Running in the way men run, when they have spent 14 hours shaking hands, nodding at slides, and saying the words, "aligned on that," so many times that the phrase had stopped meaning anything at all. He had one carry-on, half a bottle of water, and the specific exhaustion that no amount of sleep had fixed in years. His suit jacket was over his arm. His tie was loosened. His shoes, which had cost more than most people's rent, were making a sound on the terminal floor that he normally would have noticed and fixed. He did not notice. He did not fix it. He made the gate with 40 seconds to spare. The flight attendant smiled at him with the practiced patience of someone who had watched too many men like him run through too many gates. He smiled back. It was a reflex. He had trained himself into reflexes a long time ago, because reflexes required nothing from him. Marcus Cole was 44 years old. He was the chief executive officer of a logistics company called Ridgeline Solutions, which moved freight across 7 states and employed just over 200 people. The company had a glass building in Cincinnati, with his name on the letterhead, and a lobby that always smelled faintly of fresh flowers, because he had once mentioned to his building manager that hospitals were depressing, and fresh flowers helped. The building manager had remembered. That detail mattered to people who worked for him. To Marcus himself, he had forgotten saying it. He found his seat. 24A. Window. The plane was one of those regional jets with 2 seats on each side and a ceiling low enough that men over 6 feet developed a kind of permanent hunch just from walking the aisle. Marcus was 6 feet exactly, which meant he barely cleared it. He settled into the window seat, tucked his jacket into the overhead bin, and looked at the seat beside him. It was occupied. The man in 24B was not small. He was broad across the shoulders, the way men are when they have spent years doing physical work, and he was sitting with the kind of stillness that is not calm, but is instead the total absence of energy left over for anything else. He was holding something in his lap. A coloring book, the kind sold at airport gift shops, the ones with cartoon animals and thick black outlines meant for small hands with crayons. He was not coloring in it. He was just holding it, turned to a page with a lion on it, not looking at it. Marcus said, "Excuse me." The man looked up. His eyes were dark and tired in the way grief makes eyes tired, which is a different kind of tired than exhaustion. "Sure," the man said. "Go ahead." That was the whole conversation. Marcus settled in. The man with the coloring book looked back down at the lion. The flight attendant went through the safety demonstration that no one watched. The plane began to move. Outside the small oval window, the lights of Chicago Airport slid past in long orange streaks, and then the ground dropped away, and then there was nothing but dark. The man's name was Dio Osei. He was 31 years old. He was a structural engineer who worked for a firm in Columbus, Ohio, doing the kind of work that made sure bridges held the weight they were asked to hold, and buildings did not lean when the wind pushed against them. He was good at his job. He was the kind of man his colleagues trusted to look at a problem and find where the weakness was hiding before it became something worse. He was also a single father. His daughter's name was Amara. She was 7 years old and currently asleep at home, in the care of his neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Carol, who kept butterscotch candies in a bowl by her door and let Amara eat as many as she wanted, which was a rule Dio had long stopped arguing about. Amara had her father's eyes and her mother's mouth, and a laugh that had once made a grocery store full of strangers turn and smile without knowing why. Dio had been in Atlanta for 4 days. Not for work. He had gone to Atlanta to bury his mother. Her name had been Abina. She had died on a Wednesday morning, quietly, in a hospital bed with the window open and sunlight coming across the floor in long, pale strips. Dio had been there. He had held her hand. He had stayed until they asked him gently to step out, and then he had stood in the hallway and stared at a poster about hand hygiene for a very long time. He had driven to the airport and found the gift shop and stood in front of the coloring books for 6 minutes before picking one up. Amara liked lions. She had a stuffed one named Gerald. He bought the coloring book because he did not know what else to bring her. He could not bring her back her grandmother. He could not bring her back, the woman who called every Sunday and sang the first line of a birthday song in a language Amara was just beginning to learn. He could bring her a coloring book with a lion in it. So he bought it. He had not been able to put it down since. The cabin lights dimmed somewhere over the dark fields of Indiana. Most passengers settled into the particular suspension of late-night travel, that in-between state where the world feels paused. Deo turned the page of the coloring book to a parrot. He did not color it. He just looked at the blank white space inside the outlines and thought about his mother's hands, which had always been warm, even at the end. Beside him, Marcus Cole was losing his fight with consciousness. He had not meant to sleep. He never meant to sleep on planes. He carried work on every flight, a laptop or a report, or at minimum his phone, because the airtime was productive time, and productive time was the only currency he had truly learned to spend. But the laptop was in the overhead bin, and the phone battery had died somewhere over Lake Michigan, and the whiskey from the airport bar 3 hours ago had done what whiskey does to men who have not slept properly in 4 days. His head dropped. He listed sideways. And his head came to rest on Dio Osei's shoulder. Dio felt it, the weight of it, the complete and unself-conscious weight of a person who had stopped being awake and had simply surrendered to wherever gravity wanted to take him. He looked down at the man's head on his shoulder, at the graying hair at his temples, at the loosened tie and the expensive shirt collar, and the faint lines around the closed eyes of a man who looked, asleep, like he might be somebody's father, though Dio would later learn that he was not. He did not move. He did not nudge the man awake. He did not shift away. He did not press the call button and ask a flight attendant to deal with this particular small inconvenience. He sat with it. He could not have explained why. Not exactly. Not in the way you explain things that make logical sense. But somewhere in the part of him that had just spent 4 days doing the hardest thing a person can do, he recognized something in the weight of that sleeping stranger. Something exhausted past the point of pretending. Something that had given out. He had felt that himself, in the hallway outside his mother's room, staring at the hand hygiene poster. He had not had a shoulder to lean on then. He turned the page of the coloring book. A turtle this time. Amara liked turtles less than lions but more than birds. He made a note of that in the way fathers make notes, not written down anywhere, just stored in the part of the brain that never stops running the file on a child you love. 2 hours passed. The plane began its descent into Columbus. The altitude dropped. The engines changed pitch. The cabin lights came back up to the dim gold of near landing, and the flight attendant made her announcement about tray tables and seat backs. Marcus Cole came awake the way people come awake when the body registers motion and the mind scrambles behind it. He straightened, his head lifted. He registered, in the slow sequence of a man recalibrating, where he was and what had just happened. He looked at Dio's shoulder. He looked at Dio's face. The color that came into his own face was complete. "I am so sorry," he said. "I am so sorry. I did not mean to. That was—" "You were out," Dio said. "It is fine." Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, straightened his collar, looked at the seat back in front of him, as if it had done something he needed to study. "I really am sorry," he said again, quieter. "I know," Deo said. The plane touched down. The runway lights went past the window in a white blur, and then slowed to a crawl. People reached for their overhead bins before the seatbelt sign had turned off, the way people always do. The way no one can ever seem to stop doing, as though whatever is waiting at the destination might disappear in the 4 seconds it would take to wait. Marcus stood, took his jacket from the bin. He looked at Dio once more. There was something in the look that was not just embarrassment. It was something more searching than that, something that had not finished forming into a question yet. But the aisle was moving. The man with the coloring book stepped out. The crowd filled in behind him, and they were carried away in opposite directions, the way airports carry people, efficiently and without sentiment, toward whatever comes next. Marcus walked to the baggage claim in a building he had passed through 100 times. He stood at the carousel. He watched bags go by. He thought about the weight of a head on someone's shoulder. He thought about how the man had not moved, how he had simply sat there and let a stranger sleep and had not made a single thing of it. He did not know the man's name. He did not know why that bothered him as much as it did. He picked up his bag when it came around. He walked out into the Columbus night, where a car was waiting to take him home to Cincinnati, to his apartment with the expensive furniture, and the refrigerator with very little in it, to the life he had built so completely around the work, that the work had become the whole shape of the thing. He got in the car. He did not sleep the rest of the way home. He kept thinking about a man holding a coloring book at midnight, with the particular stillness of someone carrying something no one around him could see. He kept thinking about the shoulder, not his own, the one that had held him. Deo Ose took a cab home from the airport. He paid the driver. He walked up the front path of his house, the small two-bedroom on Fieldstone Drive with the porch light Carol always left on when she was watching Amara, and he stood outside his own front door for a long moment. He could hear nothing. The street was quiet. A dog somewhere 2 houses down shifted in its sleep and was still again. He put his key in the door. Amara was asleep on the couch with a throw blanket over her and a butterscotch wrapper on the cushion beside her, and Gerald, the stuffed lion, tucked under her arm. Carol had left a note on the kitchen table that said simply, "She was wonderful tonight. Call me in the morning." Deo read it twice. He folded it and put it in the kitchen drawer, where he kept things he did not want to lose. He sat on the edge of the couch beside his daughter. He put the coloring book on the coffee table in front of her, the lion page facing up. He watched her breathe. He did not cry. He had been crying for 4 days, and the body has limits on that, the same way it has limits on everything. And he had reached his. What he felt instead was something quieter and more complicated. Something that had to do with the fact that his daughter was breathing and his mother was not. And that both of these things were true at the same time. And that life asked you to hold both of them and keep going. And that sometimes a stranger on a late-night flight sat still for 2 hours, under the weight of someone they had never met, and asked for nothing, and said nothing, and it was the most human thing Deo Ose had seen all week. He turned off the lamp. He sat in the dark with his daughter until he was sure she was deep in her sleep and not about to wake up. Then he went to his own room and lay down on top of the covers fully dressed and stared at the ceiling. He thought about his mother's hands. He thought about the lion. He fell asleep. Marcus Cole did not sleep well that night, or the night after, or the night after that. This was not new. He had not slept well in years, not in the deep, total way that people sleep when they feel settled somewhere inside themselves. He slept in the way busy men sleep, in chunks, lightly, always with one part of the brain still running through whatever had not been finished that day. His doctor had told him twice to slow down. He had nodded both times in the way he nodded at things that made sense but did not change anything. But this particular sleeplessness was different. It was not a project keeping him awake. It was not a deadline or a quarterly number or a personnel problem at the Columbus warehouse. It was the memory of a stranger's shoulder, the fact of it, the way the man had simply sat there, unhurried and unmoved, while Marcus slept on him like a child on a long car ride. He lay in his apartment on the 14th floor of a building with a view of the river, and thought about it more than he wanted to admit. The city lights moved on the water outside. A car passed on the street below. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. All the sounds of a life that had been built carefully, and furnished well, and still managed to feel, at 11 at night, like a room nobody actually lived in. He got up on the second night, and made coffee he did not drink, and stood at the window in the dark, and tried to name what was bothering him. It was not embarrassment anymore. That had faded by morning. What remained was something harder to locate. It had to do with the look on the man's face when Marcus had woken up. Not irritated, not amused, just present. Just there in the completely undemanding way that some people are there, which is different from the way people are there when they want something from you, or are waiting for you to do something, or are watching to see what you will do next. Marcus had been watched his whole career. He had been studied and managed and second-guessed and impressed by more people than he could count. But this man, this stranger with the coloring book and the tired eyes and the shoulder that had held a sleeping CEO for 2 hours over a dark Midwestern sky, had done none of that. He had just sat there. He had just let him sleep. Marcus went back to bed. He did not sleep for another hour. In the morning he was in the office by 7:15, which was his habit. His office was on the top floor and had 2 windows and a desk that was always clear at the end of the day, because he processed everything before he left, which was another habit. And his assistant was a precise and capable woman named Helen, who had worked for him for 6 years, and who knew that when his jaw was set a certain way, it was not the day to ask him to sign things that could wait. She looked at his jaw at 7:20 and moved 3 things to the following day's stack. He had a budget review at 8, a call with a freight partner in Denver at 10, and a presentation from his operations team at 1 in the afternoon. He got through all of it. He always got through all of it. This was one of the things people said about Marcus Cole, that he was reliably present in every room he walked into, that he did not drift, that he gave the conversation in front of him his full attention, and his full intelligence and his full effort. That was mostly true. That day it was only partly true, and he knew it, and he suspected Helen knew it too, but Helen was professional and so was he, and so the morning went the way mornings were supposed to go. At lunch he sat at his desk and ate a sandwich he had not ordered for himself, which Helen had left without being asked because she had noticed he had not left the building yet. He opened his laptop. He typed, "How to find someone you met on a plane." He read through the results for a while. They were not helpful. They were either romantic in a way that did not apply, or cautionary in a way that felt dramatic. He closed the browser. He called the airline. He explained, calmly and briefly, that he had been on Flight 1142 from Chicago to Columbus 11 days ago and had sat next to a passenger and had reason to believe the passenger may have left something behind, and was there any way to pass along his contact information so the passenger could reach him if they wished. The agent was polite. She was also firm. They could not share or retrieve passenger information for privacy reasons. She was sorry. She hoped he understood. He said he understood. He hung up. He sat at his desk for 4 minutes doing nothing, which was unusual enough that Helen looked through the glass partition and then looked back at her screen and decided whatever it was did not require her yet. Marcus picked up his phone again. He did not call the airline back. He called instead a man named Owen Grant, who ran a small private investigation firm that Ridgeline Solutions occasionally used for background checks on potential acquisitions. Owen was thorough and discreet, and billed at a rate that reflected both of those qualities. "I need you to find someone," Marcus said. "I have a first name and a city and a physical description. That's all I have." Owen asked a few questions. He did not ask why. That was part of what Marcus paid for. "How soon do you need it?" Owen asked. "When you have it," Marcus said. "Take the time you need to be accurate." He described the man. Broad-shouldered, 30s, Columbus-based. The coloring book, the stillness, the tired eyes. Owen said he would be in touch. Marcus ended the call and looked out his window at the river and recognized, without a great deal of comfort, that he had just done something he could not entirely explain, and that the inability to explain it was not going to stop him. The thing was, Marcus Cole was not an impulsive man. He had not built a company by acting on hunches or chasing feelings he could not quantify. He was methodical. He was considered. When he made a decision, he had usually thought about it from 6 directions before committing to any of them. His board trusted him for this. His team trusted him for this. He trusted himself for this. But there were things in a life that do not arrive through the front door with paperwork and a scheduled appointment. There are things that come sideways, in the middle of a red-eye flight, when you are too tired to protect yourself against them. The man on the plane had not tried to be anything to Marcus, had not tried to impress him, or make conversation, or make the 2 hours easier or harder. He had just held still. Marcus had not had anyone hold still for him in a very long time. His sister called that evening. Her name was Laura and she lived in Nashville, and she called on Tuesday evenings the way she had for the past 3 years, since their mother had passed and they had both decided independently and without discussing it that they should probably talk more. Laura was warm and funny and asked good questions, and Marcus answered most of them honestly, which was more than he managed with most people. She asked how the Chicago conference was. He said fine, productive. She asked if he had eaten anything that was not ordered by someone else. He said the sandwich counted. She laughed. Then she asked, the way Laura asked things, which was gently but directly, "Are you doing okay?" Not work okay. Actually okay. He paused. "I met someone on a flight back," he said. "A stranger. He was carrying something heavy. You could see it. He didn't say anything about it. I fell asleep on his shoulder somehow, and when I woke up he had just let me. He didn't make a thing of it. Laura was quiet for a moment. What was he carrying? She asked. I don't know, Marcus said. That's part of it. Did you get his name? No. Another pause. So, what are you going to do? Laura asked. I'm trying to find him, Marcus said. There was a small silence on the line. Not uncomfortable. The kind of silence Laura used when she was deciding how to say what she was thinking. Good, she said finally. Don't overthink it. Just do the thing. He said goodnight. He put his phone down on the kitchen counter and looked at the view again and thought about what the thing actually was. He did not fully know yet. He just knew he owed something to a man whose shoulder he had slept on without asking, who had sat in the dark with someone else's weight and not moved, and who had gotten off a plane in the middle of the night carrying a coloring book bought at the last minute for a child he was going home to, because even when the world had taken something from him that could not be given back, he was still thinking about what to bring. 11 days passed. On the 12th day, Owen Grant called. I have your man, he said. Name is Dio Osei, 31, structural engineer. Works for a firm called Calvert Engineering in Columbus. Father to one daughter, age 7. Recently bereaved. His mother passed about 2 weeks ago. Clean record, solid reputation, good standing by every account. Marcus sat very still with the phone against his ear. That's it, he said. That's everything, Owen said. Marcus thanked him. He ended the call. He sat with the file on his screen for a long time. Bereaved. 2 weeks ago, he had been on that plane the night of, or close to it. The coloring book, the stillness, the tired eyes that were tired in a specific way, in the way of a person who has looked at something that cannot be unseen, and is learning to carry the weight of having looked. He had not been carrying work. He had been carrying grief. And he had still not moved. Marcus closed the file on his screen. He did not open it again that day. He went home and cooked a meal for himself, which he did rarely, and he sat at the kitchen table and ate it slowly. He thought about what to do next, and he was aware, with a clarity that surprised him, that whatever he did next had to be done right, not impressively, not generously in the way that could be misread as performance. Right. He took out a piece of paper. He wrote the man's name at the top. Then he stared at the blank space below it for a long time. He had drafted many things in his career: proposals, strategies, statements for press. He had learned long ago that the first version of anything important was never the right version, that the real message lived somewhere beneath the first draft like a city beneath the street, and you had to dig through the obvious words before you found the ones that were actually true. He wrote 3 drafts over 2 evenings. The first was too formal. It read like a memo. The second was too much. It explained itself too thoroughly, which is what people do when they are not sure they deserve to be understood. The third draft was 1 paragraph. He read it 4 times. He knew it was right, not because it said everything, but because it did not. It left the space a person needed to receive something from a stranger and not feel crowded by it. He folded it. He found a piece of paper for a child and wrote a second, shorter note. He found a gift card to an art supply store and tucked it inside. He sealed the envelope. He wrote the address Owen had given him in Columbus. He gave it to Helen the next morning and asked her to mail it that day. Regular post, no return address label with the company name, just his name. Helen held the envelope with the careful neutrality she applied to things that were clearly personal. Anything else? She asked. No, Marcus said. Thank you. He went into his office. He closed the door. He stood at the window and looked at the river, and felt something that he had not felt in so long that it took him a moment to identify it. It was not hope exactly. It was closer to what hope is made from, the small, quiet act of reaching toward another person without knowing what you will find when you do. He turned away from the window. He sat down. He got back to work, but he was not the same that day as he had been the day before. And Helen noticed, though she said nothing, because what she noticed was not a problem. What she noticed was that when his 2 o'clock ran long, and he had to reschedule his 3, he did not make the face he usually made. He just said, "That's fine." Tell them I'm sorry for the delay. Tell them I'm sorry. He had not added the apology before. In 6 years, he had never added the apology. Helen rescheduled the meeting. She went back to her desk. She made a small note in the margin of her own calendar. Not anything official, just a word. The word was better. She did not tell anyone. She just kept the note and went back to work and thought that whatever had happened on that flight to Columbus, she hoped it kept happening. Because the man who had come back from Chicago was the same man who had left. But the one standing at the window that morning was something slightly more than that, and she did not have a word for the difference. She just knew it was real. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Deo knew it was Tuesday, because Amara had swimming lessons on Tuesdays, and he had packed her swim bag the night before and left it by the door, and he was standing at the kitchen counter eating toast when he heard the letter slot click. He did not go to the door right away. He finished his toast. He rinsed the plate. He checked the time on the microwave and confirmed they had 40 minutes before they needed to leave. Then he went to the door. There were 3 envelopes on the floor, a phone bill, a catalog he had never signed up for, and a white envelope, slightly thicker than normal, with his address written in handwriting he did not recognize. No return company name, just a name, Marcus Cole, a Cincinnati postmark. He did not know anyone named Marcus Cole in Cincinnati. He picked it up. He looked at it for a moment. He carried it to the kitchen and set it on the table while he made Amara's lunch, cutting her sandwich into the triangle shapes she preferred over rectangles, a preference she had formed at age 5 and had not moved from since. He put the sandwich in the container and added the small bag of crackers and the apple cut into slices, because she did not like biting into whole apples since she had lost her front tooth last spring. He sat down at the table. He opened the envelope. There were 3 things inside: a folded piece of white paper, a smaller, folded piece of paper, and a small gift card in a paper sleeve. He read the gift card sleeve first. It was from an art supply store with several locations in Columbus. There was a handwritten number on the back, $150. He set it down. He opened the smaller piece of paper. It was written in the same handwriting as the envelope, careful and slightly formal, like someone who had learned to write before computers changed what handwriting was for. It said, "For a girl who deserves good colors. With respect." He set that down too. He opened the main letter. It was 1 paragraph. He read it once. He read it again. He put it flat on the table and pressed his palm against it, the way people press against things that feel like they might not stay put. The paragraph said this: "You did not know me. You did not owe me anything. You let me sleep anyway. I don't know what you were carrying that night, but I could see it was heavy, and I hope that something somewhere has made it a little lighter since then. I am sorry I was not awake enough to ask you that when it mattered. If you are ever in Cincinnati and find yourself wanting a meal that you did not have to cook, it would be my honor to provide one. No obligation. I only want to be someone who shows up for a change." He read it a 3rd time. Then he sat at the kitchen table for a while without moving. He was not sure what he felt. He was not sure there was a clean word for it. It was not exactly surprise, though there was some of that. It was not emotion in the sentimental way, though there was some of that too. It was something closer to the feeling he got when a structural calculation came out right on the first pass, when the numbers lined up in a way that made simple and total sense, when the thing was sound. This man had found him. This man, who had fallen asleep on his shoulder in the dark above the Midwest without asking, who had woken up red-faced and apologizing, who had walked off the plane without a second glance from Deo because Deo had not expected to see him again, and had not been thinking about second glances, had somehow found him, and written him a letter by hand, 1 paragraph. No performance in it, no explanation of who he was or what he did, or why he had done the looking, just the paragraph, just the one clean, honest thing. He heard Amara coming down the hallway. She came into the kitchen in her swimsuit, with a towel around her shoulders, and her swim bag dragging behind her on the floor. "I'm ready," she announced. "You're missing your goggles," Deo said. She looked at the bag. She looked at him. She turned around and went back down the hallway. He heard the dragging of the bag on the carpet getting quieter. He looked at the letter on the table. He picked up the art supply gift card and the small note and carried them to the kitchen drawer, where he kept things he did not want to lose, the same drawer that held Carol's note from the night he came home from Atlanta. He tucked them in carefully. He folded the main letter back into its envelope and carried it to his bedroom and put it on his nightstand. He did not know yet what he would do with it. He went back to the kitchen. Amara came back, goggles around her neck, bag on her shoulder correctly this time. "Now I'm ready," she said. "Now you are," Deo agreed. He drove her to the community center. He sat in the parent area while she swam, watching her through the glass, watching the particular joy of a child in water, all splash and movement, and no self-consciousness at all. The instructor was a patient young woman who corrected Amara's kick 3 times in the same session, without once making her feel she had done it wrong. Deo sat and thought about the letter. He thought about the fact that someone had taken the trouble to find him, which was not a small thing. He thought about the fact that the man had sent a note for Amara without knowing her name, without knowing anything about her except that the coloring book was not for himself. He thought about the word honor, how it was not a word people used often now, and how when it was used carelessly it sounded stiff and old, but how in that sentence, in that particular paragraph, it had not sounded stiff at all. It had sounded like what it meant. He thought about what kind of man wrote one honest paragraph when he could have written 5 impressive ones. Amara surfaced at the end of the lane and looked through the glass and found him in the exact spot he always sat and waved with her whole arm. He raised his hand. She went back under. He thought about his mother. He thought about how she had always said that the character of a person was not visible in the big moments, not in the speeches and the ceremonies, and the things people did when they knew they were being watched. She had said it was visible in the small moments, the ones nobody was timing or grading. The moment when someone let you sleep on their shoulder, the moment when someone sat still under your weight and asked you nothing. She had also said, more than once, that when something good comes your way, you do not turn from it out of caution. You open the door and see what is there. He had not opened many doors in the years since his wife had gone. She had not died. She had simply decided one morning, when Amara was 2 years old, that the life she was living was not the one she wanted, and she had left with a bag and a clean finality that had not left room for a great deal of conversation. She was not a bad person. She was a person who had found herself inside a life that did not fit, and had not known how to say so until she did the thing instead. Deo did not hate her. He had passed through something that resembled hatred a long time ago, and had come out the other side into something that did not have a simple name. He had raised Amara. He had gone to work and come home and read bedtime stories and made triangle sandwiches and attended school events and all the other things that make up the daily architecture of a child's life. And he had done all of it with the steady attention of a man who understood that the structure had to hold even when the ground was moving. He had not opened many doors. He thought about the letter. He drove Amara home. He made dinner. He helped her with her reading assignment, which was a short chapter about a girl who discovered a bird with an injured wing in her backyard and learned to care for it. Amara had opinions about the girl's methods and shared them at length. He listened to all of them. He told her the opinions were good ones. He put her to bed. He read 2 chapters of the ongoing adventure novel they were working through together, in which a boy found a door in his school basement that led to somewhere else entirely. Amara fell asleep before the chapter ended, which was usual, and he finished the chapter quietly and closed the book and turned off the lamp. He went to his room. He picked up the letter from the nightstand. He read it one more time in the light from the bedside lamp. Then he got up and went to the kitchen drawer. He took out the small piece of paper meant for Amara, the one that said for a girl who deserves good colors. He looked at it. He thought about how the man had not known her name and had written, "A girl," and had gotten it exactly right, in the way that careful people get things right. He went to his desk in the small second room he used as a workspace. He found a piece of paper, not anything special, just plain lined paper from a notepad he kept for project notes. He sat down. He thought for a moment. He wrote. He kept it short. He was not a man who used many words when fewer ones said the same thing. He thanked the man, plainly and without performance. He told him that the night he had come home from Atlanta and found his daughter asleep on the couch was the night he had needed something to be ordinary and kind, and that Deo did not know why he had let him sleep. He just knew that it had felt right to let a tired person rest. He told him that his daughter's name was Amara, and that she liked lions and art and long books and making her own rules about things. He paused. He wrote one more line. He said that if the offer of a meal still stood in a few months, when things felt a little more like normal again, he might take him up on it. Not in Cincinnati. Maybe somewhere in the middle. Columbus, maybe. He signed it. He folded it. He found an envelope in the desk drawer and wrote the Cincinnati return address from the original envelope and nothing else. He put it on the counter to mail in the morning. Then he went back to his room and turned off the light and lay in the dark and listened to the house, which was small and quiet and full of the particular peace of a place where people sleep. He thought about what his mother would have said about all of this. She would have said, "See, there it is. You opened the door and there it was." She had been right about most things. He pulled the blanket up. He closed his eyes. For the first time in weeks, he did not lie awake. He slept, deeply and without interruption, all the way through to morning, when Amara came and stood beside his bed, and put her face 6 inches from his, and whispered his name until he opened his eyes, which was the way she always woke him, which was one of his favorite things in the world even when it was 6:15 in the morning, and he had wanted 20 more minutes. "Daddy," she whispered. "I'm awake," he said. "You were smiling," she said. He did not know what to say to that. "Go get breakfast started," he said. "I'll be there in a minute." She went. He heard her small feet on the floor. He heard the kitchen light click on. He lay for a moment in the quiet. He was, he realized, not exactly smiling, but he was close enough that a 7-year-old with good eyes could see it in the dark, which was close enough. He got up. He started the day. Marcus received the letter 5 days later. He read it at his kitchen table on a Saturday morning, which was the only morning he did not have a reason to be at the office by 7. He read it without hurrying. He read it twice. He read the part about Amara a third time. Amara. He said the name quietly in the empty kitchen. He put the letter down and looked at the window, and at the morning light coming through it, and at the river beyond, which was doing the slow glittering thing it did in the early morning, when the angle of the light was right. He thought about what the man had written, about needing something to be ordinary and kind when he came home that night, about not knowing why he had let him sleep, about just knowing it felt right to let a tired person rest. He sat with that for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and called his sister. Laura picked up on the second ring, which was unusual for a Saturday morning, but Laura kept unpredictable hours and had never apologized for it. He wrote back, Marcus said. A pause. Then, "Tell me." He told her. When he was done, Laura did not say anything for a moment. "His name is Deo," she said. "Yes." "And his daughter is named Amara." "Yes." "And you want to meet him?" It was not a question. Laura had always done that, turned his statements back to him as facts, because she had understood from the time they were children that her brother sometimes needed to hear what he already knew said aloud before he could act on it. "Yes," Marcus said. "Then write back," she said. "And this time, pick somewhere in the middle. Don't make him come all the way to you." He smiled. "I already know it," he said. "I know you do," she said. "Just making sure." He thanked her. He put the phone down. He got a piece of paper. He wrote back. He said yes to Columbus. He said yes to whenever the timing felt right. He said he would wait as long as it took and not push for anything sooner than was comfortable. He said he looked forward to knowing more about a girl named Amara who liked lions. He sealed the envelope. He put it on the counter to mail on Monday. He went and made himself a proper breakfast, not ordered, not delivered, but made with his own hands in his own kitchen. Eggs and toast and coffee in a mug he chose deliberately from the cabinet. Not the closest one, but the one he actually liked. He sat at the table and ate it. He read the paper. He had nowhere to be until noon. For the first time in a long time, that felt exactly right. They met on a Saturday in early spring. It had taken 4 months from the first letter, 4 months of short, unhurried exchanges, letters that came every 2 or 3 weeks, in which both men said what they meant and nothing extra. Marcus learned that Dayo's firm had just taken on a bridge renovation project in central Ohio. Dayo learned that Marcus had started leaving the office at a reasonable hour. a change that apparently surprised his staff enough to be remarkable. Marcus sent a newspaper clipping once, an article about a new species of bird discovered in South America. He did not explain why. Dio sent back a sketch Amara had drawn of what she imagined the bird looked like based on the article description. It had very large feet and was purple. Marcus kept it. The restaurant was Dio's suggestion, a family-owned Italian place on a side street in Columbus's Short North neighborhood. The kind of place with paper on the tablecloths, and a chalkboard menu, and candles in old bottles. Not expensive, not impressive, just good. Marcus drove up from Cincinnati on Saturday morning. He took the highway and arrived 45 minutes early, which was his habit, and spent the extra time walking around the neighborhood, looking into the storefronts, watching the city go about its Saturday morning business. He had been to Columbus many times for work. He had never actually walked around in it. He found the restaurant. He went in. He was early enough that the hostess was still setting up, and gave him a corner table without being asked. He ordered water. He straightened the silverware. He was working on straightening it a third time when the door opened. Dio came in first. He was wearing a gray sweater and dark jeans and looked exactly as Marcus had remembered, broad and calm and quietly present. Behind him was Amara. Marcus had not been prepared for Amara. She was small in the way 7-year-olds are small, with the particular compactness of children who are still working out how much space they are supposed to take up. She had her father's dark eyes, and she was wearing a jacket with a lion embroidered on the pocket, which Marcus noticed immediately, and which made him look at Dio with something that was not quite a smile but was close. Dio saw him, and lifted his chin in acknowledgement. He put his hand briefly on Amara's shoulder, and said something quiet to her that Marcus could not hear. They came to the table. Marcus stood up. He had prepared for this in the way he prepared for things that mattered. He had thought about what to say. He had considered several versions of it. He had settled on something simple and direct, which was his preference when he remembered to apply it. He said, "I'm Marcus. It's good to meet you." Dio shook his hand. His grip was exactly what Marcus had expected, firm and honest. "Dio," he said, "this is Amara." Amara looked at Marcus with the clear, unguarded assessment of a child who has not yet learned to pretend she is not looking. "My dad said you fell asleep on the plane," she said. Marcus blinked. "I did," he said, "on your dad's shoulder." "He let you," she said. "He did," Marcus said. "That was very kind of him." She seemed to weigh this. "Daddy lets me sleep on his shoulder when I'm tired," she said. "But I'm his daughter. You're a stranger." "I was a stranger," Marcus said. "I'm hoping to be a little less of one today." She looked at him for another moment. Then she nodded as though something had been settled. "Okay," she said, and climbed into her chair. Dio caught Marcus's eye, and there was something in his expression that was not quite an apology, and not quite a warning, and was mostly just fatherly acknowledgement that his daughter was exactly this direct at all times. They sat down. The waiter came. Amara asked immediately whether there was a children's menu and, upon receiving one, took it with the gravity of someone receiving an important document. She deliberated for a full 3 minutes before announcing she wanted pasta with butter and cheese and no sauce of any kind. Marcus ordered the same, which made her look at him differently. "You like butter pasta too?" she asked. "It is the ideal pasta," he said. She nodded slowly. "I agree," she said. Something relaxed at the table after that. Not that it had been tense exactly, but there had been a carefulness in the air that belonged to two people who have written each other letters, but not yet been in the same room, not yet had to fill real silence with real words. The pasta agreement with Amara broke something open, and the conversation after it moved more easily. Dio talked about the bridge project. He talked about it the way people talk about work they genuinely care about. Not performing enthusiasm, but demonstrating it. The specific kind of care that lives in the details. He told Marcus about a particular calculation that had kept him at his desk 3 nights in a row because it was not quite right, and he could not find where it was wrong, and then found it finally at 7 in the morning, when he was on his second coffee, and the light was coming in a certain way, and the mistake was suddenly obvious, and also completely preventable. "Did that bother you?" Marcus asked. "That it was preventable?" Dascio considered this. "It bothered me less than the missing it," he said. "I can accept that I made an error. What I find harder to accept is that I did not see it sooner. Marcus nodded. I know that feeling. What kind of mistakes do you make? Amara asked. Both men looked at her. She was looking at Marcus with her chin slightly raised, waiting. More than people think, Marcus said. Fewer than I used to. That's good, she said. Getting better is important. It is, he said. Deo smiled into his water glass. The food came. Amara applied herself to her pasta with complete concentration. The way children eat when they are genuinely happy with what is in front of them. Marcus watched her for a moment and thought about the coloring book, about the lion page facing up on the coffee table, which Dio had mentioned in his first letter, placed there for her to find, about the way a man who had just buried his mother had still been thinking about what to bring his daughter home. I wanted to ask you something, Marcus said. He was looking at Dio. That night, on the plane, what were you thinking about when you were looking at the coloring book? Deo set his fork down. He was quiet for a moment. My mother's hands, he said. They were always warm. I kept thinking about that. Marcus said nothing. There was nothing to say that would not have been less than that. After a moment, Dio added, I think that's why I didn't move. When you fell asleep, I had been thinking about what it means to carry someone. She carried me my whole life. I think I needed to carry something. The table was very quiet. Amara looked between them. She had stopped eating. She had the particular sensitivity of a child raised in a single-parent home, the attentiveness to shifts in the emotional temperature of the room, the ability to read adults in the way that children who have had to become good readers of adults do. She reached across the table and patted Dio's hand twice. He looked at her. She went back to her pasta. Marcus looked at the tablecloth. He pressed his finger to the edge of the paper, which was the restaurant's kind, slightly rough, the color of cream. She sounds like she was remarkable, Marcus said. She was ordinary, Deo said. In the best possible way. She cooked and she called on Sundays, and she sang at the wrong moments, and she was always warm. That's it. That's the whole list. That's not a short list, Marcus said. No, Deo said, it's not. They finished the meal talking about smaller things. Amara told Marcus about her school project on ecosystems, which she had chosen to do on freshwater rivers, because rivers were connected to bridges, and bridges were connected to her father, and she liked the connection. Marcus asked her questions about the project, and she answered them in full, correcting him once when he misidentified the type of ecosystem a beaver dam created. He accepted the correction. She approved of this. When the plates were cleared, the waiter brought the paper tablecloth roll out with crayons, which the restaurant offered to children, and Amara took possession of the crayons immediately and began drawing without preamble. Marcus watched her draw. She was doing a lion, working from memory, pulling the mane out wide and giving it detailed texture with short strokes. He watched her work for a while. May I? He said, gesturing toward a crayon. Amara looked at him. She selected a blue crayon from the box and held it out. Blue, which was clearly not the color in active use. A test. He took the blue crayon. He drew badly. He drew with complete sincerity and no skill whatsoever, a kind of squarish shape that might have been a building, or might have been a box. Amara watched him. What is that? She asked. It's the office building where I work, he said. It doesn't look like a building. No, he agreed. I'm not good at drawing. She considered. Then she reached over, without asking, and added a small flag to the top of his square. She gave it a window with a star in it. Now it's better, she said. He looked at it. You're right, he said. It's much better. The afternoon went longer than any of them had planned. When Marcus finally looked at his phone, it was past 4 o'clock, and he had a 2-hour drive ahead of him. He called for the check. There was a brief and firm disagreement about who would pay it. Deo maintained that Marcus was a guest in his city, and guests did not pay. Marcus maintained that the invitation had been his, and therefore so was the bill. Amara ended the disagreement by saying they should split it, which was practical and also final, because both men recognized that arguing further would require one of them to explain to a 7-year-old why the other one's logic was wrong, and neither of them wanted that assignment. They split it. Outside on the sidewalk, the afternoon had turned cool, and the short north was alive with the early spring crowd. People walking and cycling and sitting at the outdoor tables that had just come back out after winter. Amara held her father's hand and looked at the people and the dogs and the window displays with the total openness of a child who finds everything worth looking at. Marcus put on his jacket. He extended his hand to Dio. Dio shook it. "Thank you for coming up," Dio said. "Thank you for the letter," Marcus said, "and for the original." Dio looked at him. "The original." "The night you let me sleep," Marcus said. "That was a letter too. Just not one that needed paper." Dio was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My mother would have liked you." Marcus felt that move through him in a way he did not have words for, and did not try to find them. He looked at Amara, who had found a dog at the end of a leash held by a passing stranger, and was asking the stranger its name, with complete confidence that the stranger would want to answer. "She's wonderful," Marcus said. "I know," Dio said. "Simple, without performance." Marcus looked at him. "Same time next month?" he said. Dio considered this with the same deliberate attention he gave to structural calculations. "Yes," he said. Marcus nodded. He said goodbye to Amara, who was still engaged with the dog, and said goodbye over her shoulder without turning around, which Marcus found he did not mind at all. He walked back to his car. He sat in it for a moment, before starting the engine. He thought about what Dio had said. "My mother would have liked you." He thought about the kind of man who gets to have that said about him, the kind who shows up, the kind who carries things carefully, the kind who lets people rest. He was not sure he was that man yet, but he was closer than he had been. He started the car. He drove home in the early evening light with the radio off and the windows cracked and the highway open in front of him, and he thought about all the things he had been too busy to think about for too long, and he let himself think about them, one at a time, all the way home. It was the best drive he had taken in years. The months that followed were not dramatic. That was perhaps the most important thing about them. They were ordinary in the way that good things are ordinary. Not spectacular, not headline-worthy, but present and consistent, and quietly accumulating into something that both men, in different ways, had been missing without knowing exactly what to call the absence. Marcus came to Columbus on the third Saturday of every month. Sometimes they went back to the Italian place. Sometimes Dio chose somewhere different. A taco spot Amara was devoted to. A bakery on the east side that made bread that Dio said was the best in the city, and which Marcus, after his first visit, agreed with entirely. Once, when the weather turned properly warm, they went to a park, and Amara led them on what she described as a nature walk, which was less a walk and more a tour of every interesting thing she had spotted from previous visits, conducted with the authority of a child who had decided she was the guide and expected her audience to keep up. Marcus kept up. It was noted by his staff, the change in him, though most of them could not have said precisely what had changed. He was not softer exactly. He was still decisive and still demanding in the particular way of people who hold high standards because they believe the work deserves them. But something in the texture of how he moved through the office had shifted. He listened longer before speaking. He asked questions that were not strategic, questions that were about the people giving the answers rather than the answers themselves. He learned the names of the people on the cleaning crew. He had always known their names, but he began using them when he passed, which was a different thing. His operations director, a capable woman named Claire who had worked at Ridgeline for 9 years, said in the margins of a staff meeting to the finance manager beside her that she did not know what had happened to Marcus, but she hoped it kept going. The finance manager, whose name was Peter, said he had noticed it too. They did not discuss it further. They did not need to. Helen, his assistant, had known something had shifted since the morning she wrote the word better in the margin of her calendar. She watched the shift deepen over the months with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had been patient a long time and found that the patience was worth it. Marcus began taking real weekends. This was, for him, a seismic event. He had not taken a real weekend in the full sense, 2 days away from the office in which he was not also managing emails or reviewing documents, or thinking in the specifically productive way that is just work wearing casual clothes. since he could not remember when. Weekends had been a concept he nodded at from a distance the way you nod at a beautiful view through the window of a moving car. Noted, not stopped for. Now he stopped. He read books he had been carrying in his bag for 3 years, meaning to get to. He cooked meals that took time. He walked along the river on Sunday mornings and watched the water and did not have his phone out. He called Laura every Tuesday. He started calling on Sundays too. Laura said, one Tuesday evening, that she had not heard him sound like this in a very long time. Like what? He asked. Present, she said. Like you are actually in the room you're standing in. He thought about that. I think I forgot for a while, he said. How to be in a room. What reminded you? She asked. He thought about a shoulder, about a coloring book with a lion, about a man who sat still in the dark with a weight he had not chosen and asked for nothing. Someone showed me, he said. Deo, for his part, was changing too, though differently, and at a pace that was his own. Grief does not move in a straight line, and he had stopped expecting it to. There were mornings when he woke, and for one unguarded second before memory settled in, he reached for his phone to call his mother, because Sunday was still Sunday, and his body had not yet fully learned the new version of it. There were moments with Amara, watching her laugh or seeing her sleep, or hearing her say something that sounded exactly like something his mother used to say, when the weight of the two things, gratitude and loss, pressed against each other in a way that made breathing require attention. But he was not drowning in it. He had not been drowning in it for a long time. He had good work. He had Amara. He had Carol across the street who kept the butterscotch bowl full, and who had begun attending Amara's school events with the reliable presence of someone who had quietly adopted a small family she had not been asked to adopt. He had the letters, first, and then the Saturdays, and then the slow accumulation of a friendship that was honest in the particular way that friendships between people who have nothing to prove to each other are honest. Marcus did not need anything from Dio that Dio was not freely offering. This was not common in Dio's experience of people who had what Marcus had. Men of that particular kind of professional weight often carried into their personal lives the expectation of return, the assumption that what was given would eventually be accounted for. Marcus did not carry that assumption. When he showed up simply, as a person, with no agenda beyond the afternoon. Dio trusted him for this. It had taken a few months. He was not a fast truster, but once given, his trust was complete, and he gave it the same way he gave everything that mattered, without condition and without revision. Amara had no such process. She had decided about Marcus at the restaurant table, within approximately 10 minutes of the butter pasta conversation, and her decision had not wavered since. She showed him her school projects. She told him about Gerald the stuffed lion, who had recently survived a washing machine incident and come out slightly smaller, but otherwise fine. She asked him about his job with the directness of a child who does not yet understand why questions about money and work and what things cost are supposed to be softened, and Marcus answered her directly, which she respected. She asked him once if he had children. No, he said. Why not? She asked. I didn't have time, he said. I was too busy with work. She thought about this. That's a mistake, she said. You would be good at it. He looked at her. He did not say anything for a long moment. Thank you, he said finally. You're welcome, she said, and went back to whatever she was drawing. He told Dasho about this exchange later, when Amara was distracted, and they were sitting with coffee at the end of a Saturday afternoon. Dasho smiled. She's not wrong, he said. I know, Marcus said. The thing that happened in October was not one thing. It was several small things that came together, in a way that people who heard about it later, compressed into a single story, which is the way people always handle things that are actually more complicated than a single story can hold. What happened was this. Marcus learned, through channels he would not go into, that Dio's firm had submitted a bid on a major infrastructure project in Columbus, a renovation of the downtown transit corridor that would be one of the largest engineering projects in the city in 20 years. Dio had told him about it, once, briefly, in the way he mentioned work things that were significant, but not certain. The bid had been submitted. There was a long process ahead. He had said no more about it, and Marcus had not pushed. What Marcus learned from his channels was that the bid was close. that Deo's firm was technically one of the strongest in the running, that the main obstacle was a financial one, a surety bond requirement that the firm's current size made difficult to meet. Not impossible, but slow, requiring time and paperwork that the project timeline did not comfortably allow. He did not tell Deo what he had learned. He made 3 phone calls, not to anyone on the selection committee, because that would have been improper, and Marcus Cole did not operate improperly. He called instead to a man he had worked with on a financial review board who had connections in the commercial bonding world, to ask about the process and what it took, and what could be done to smooth it without crossing any lines. The man told him what he needed to know. Then Marcus made one more call, to a commercial finance officer he trusted completely, and he asked whether there was a structure under which a private individual could provide a guarantee for a bonding application without it being attached to anything irregular. There was. He did not tell Deo. He set the mechanism in motion and let it run. It was not simple. It took 6 weeks and several conversations, and one thick stack of documents that Helen managed with her usual precision and her usual discretion. When she put the final signature page in front of Marcus, she did not ask what it was for. She had learned by now that the things that mattered to him most were the things he was least likely to explain. He signed. He filed. He said nothing to Deo. In November, Deo called him on a Thursday evening, which was unusual. Deo almost never called on weekdays, and almost always texted first to ask if calling was okay. He called without warning, which told Marcus before the call began that something had happened. He picked up. "We got the contract," Deo said. His voice was the voice of a man who has been sitting with enormous news for several hours and has not fully digested it. "Deo," Marcus said. "I don't understand what happened," Deo said. "The bonding issue. It just cleared. Nobody at the firm can explain it. The attorney said there was a private guarantee filed, and the paperwork was perfect, and it just went through, and now we have the contract." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Was that you?" Marcus looked out his window at the river, which was doing the slow glittering thing in the November evening, darker now than in summer, the light leaving earlier. He was quiet for exactly long enough. "You didn't have to do that," Deo said. His voice was different now, not sharp, not accusatory, just full in the way of a man who is holding more than he expected to hold. "I know," Marcus said. "Why?" Marcus thought about how to answer this honestly. He thought about it carefully. "Because it was the right thing," he said, "and because I could, and because for a very long time I used things I could do to make things easier for myself, and I wanted to use something I could do for someone else for a change." The line was quiet. "My mother would have said something about this," Deo said. His voice was very quiet. "What would she have said?" Marcus asked. A pause. "She would have said that what comes around goes around," Deo said. "She believed that completely. I used to think it was too simple. I'm starting to think she was right." Marcus said nothing. He did not need to. They talked for a while longer about the project, about what it meant for the firm, about the years of work ahead, and what the bridge, when it was done, would look like against the Columbus skyline. Deo talked about it the way he talked about all his work, with the specific care of a man who understood that what he built had to hold, not just on paper but in practice, under real weight, in real weather, for real people who would cross it without thinking about what it took to make it safe. Marcus listened to all of it. When they finally said goodnight and Marcus put the phone down, he sat for a long time in the quiet of his apartment, with the river going dark outside and the city lights coming on one by one in the windows across the water. He thought about a late flight, a seat in economy, a stranger holding a coloring book, a head that had fallen sideways without asking permission, and a shoulder that had accepted the weight without requiring a reason. He thought about how the smallest things build the largest structures. Deo was a structural engineer. He understood this in mathematics and concrete and steel. Marcus had understood it in balance sheets and supply chains. Neither of them had understood it. Not really. Not in the part of the self that is not professional, until a delayed red-eye had put them next to each other in the dark. He got up. He went to the kitchen. He opened the drawer where he kept a few things he did not want to lose, and he took out the folded piece of tablecloth paper from the Italian restaurant, the one Amara had signed with a star, because she had decided he was a star kind of person. He smoothed it flat on the counter. He looked at it for a long time. He thought about what it meant to be decided about, to be assessed by someone who had no reason to be generous and was anyway, to be given a star not because you had earned it on any official ledger, but because a 7-year-old with good eyes had looked at you across a table of butter pasta and decided. He put it back in the drawer carefully. He turned off the kitchen light. He went to bed. He slept. The bridge project in Columbus took 3 years to complete. When it was finished, it was the kind of bridge that people drove out of their way to cross, not because it was the fastest route, but because of the way it sat over the water, clean and confident, and built with the particular solidity of something made by people who cared whether it held. Dayo Osei stood on it on the day it opened with Amara beside him, who was 10 now and had grown 3 inches and still liked lions and still drew them. Better now, with a confidence of line that had been developing steadily since the art supply gift card that had sat in a kitchen drawer for 2 weeks, before she discovered it, and used every dollar on pencils and paper, and one very good set of watercolors. Marcus came to Columbus for the opening. He stood on the bridge with them. He looked out at the river below, which was the kind of gray-green that rivers are in October, full and moving and indifferent to the people standing above it. Amara leaned on the railing and looked down. "Dad built this," she said, "to no one and everyone." Dayo put his hand on her shoulder. Marcus looked at the two of them. He did not say anything. He did not need to. There are moments in a life that do not require language, that resist it, even, because language would make them smaller than they are. This was one of them. A bridge over a river, on an October morning, 3 people standing on something solid that had not existed 4 years ago, held up by calculations no one crossing it would ever see, by work no one walking over it would ever fully understand, by the kind of invisible effort that is the whole difference between something that holds and something that does not. Dayo looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at him. Neither of them said anything. They had gotten past the need to say everything. That was what 4 years of letters and Saturdays and butter pasta and tablecloth lions and one honest paragraph and one telephone call on a Thursday evening had built between them. Not the need to fill the silence, the ability to stand inside it and let it mean what it meant. Amara pushed off from the railing and looked at both of them. "Can we get lunch?" she asked. "Yes," both men said, at the same time. She looked between them with satisfaction. "Good," she said. She walked ahead of them toward the far end of the bridge, her jacket open in the October air, her footsteps steady on the road that her father had made sure would hold. They followed. The river moved below them. The city went about its life on both sides of the bridge, unhurried and continuous, the way cities go about their lives without knowing all the things that had to happen in order for any given ordinary moment to exist. A delayed flight. A dark cabin. A man too tired to stay upright. A shoulder that did not move. None of it was planned. None of it was inevitable. It was the kind of thing that happens when people are too tired to protect themselves against being human, and someone else is present enough to notice, and neither of them walks away fast enough. Sometimes that is all it takes. Sometimes that is everything. Marcus Cole got home to Cincinnati that evening and found, on his kitchen counter, a drawing Amara had pressed into his hand at the restaurant when her father was settling the check. He had not looked at it yet. He unfolded it. It was the bridge. It was the bridge, drawn in pencil with great precision for a 10-year-old, the cables and the arch and the road surface and the river below. At one end of the bridge stood a small figure with wide shoulders. At the other end stood a taller figure, with a loosened tie drawn in great careful detail. In the middle of the bridge, between them, she had drawn a lion. Underneath it, in her handwriting, which was still not perfectly neat but was entirely legible, she had written one line. It said, "Some things you build without knowing." He put it on the kitchen counter. He stood there looking at it for a long time. Then he went to the drawer and took out the tablecloth lion and set it beside the bridge drawing, the two of them side by side on the counter, both drawn in the same careful hand, both kept by the same man who had learned, 4 years and a lifetime after a late-night flight into Columbus, that the things worth keeping were never the things you went looking for, They were the things you found when you were tired enough to stop guarding the door. He made tea. He sat at the table. He looked at his kitchen, which was the same kitchen it had always been. Same river through the same window, same chair, same table. And he looked at the two drawings on the counter and understood that the room was different now. Not because anything in it had changed, but because someone was actually living in it. He drank his tea. He called his sister. She picked up on the first ring. "Well," she said. He told her about the bridge, about October light on the water, about Amara leaning on the railing saying Dad built this, about two men standing on something solid and not needing to speak. Laura was quiet through all of it. When he finished, she said, "Are you happy?" He thought about it honestly, the way he had started thinking about things that deserved honesty. "Yes," he said. "Good," she said. "Yeah," he said. And it was.